Hi there, welcome to part 3 of the Antoria Snow Eagle restoration. If you haven't seen the first couple of videos, you can check those out first. They focus on the repair side of it, and this one's more on the painting and assembling of it. So at the end of this video you get to see it finally finished and how it sounds. But first we're going to go to the spray room where I've been spraying the primer. So here it is after a few coats of primer. I put the first couple of coats on and sanded it back just to find any little imperfections and smooth them out. It's always worth doing a good few primer coats to make sure you've got a really nice surface to paint the colour onto, so you don't want to end up wasting loads of colour coats or ending up with too much clear after if you try and correct it that way. So much better to use a good few coats of primer. This has had about 3 on it so far and it's now ready for the colour. So that's what I'm going to do next. So now I've sprayed the colour coats and actually all the clear coats too. It's about 6 coats of clear on this. And then you can see it's got a pretty good finish straight out the gun. You'll need obviously wet sanding like as usual and buffing, but you can see the airlines reflecting in it there, just here, over there, and you can see there's not much distortion around it, no too much texture or anything like that. Let's have a look at the back. So I'll probably start at 1000 grit when I come to wet sand this. And that still shouldn't take that long, and then I can progress through 1500, 2000, and then buff it. But before I can do any of that wet sanding or buffing, I've got to hang the guitar up for a few weeks for it to the lacquer to harden up and for it to do the majority of the shrinking it's going to do. Nitrocellulose lacquer never really stops shrinking. It carries on going for a long time, which is why vintage instruments have got such a thin finish on them. It's not the way they were sprayed, it's just over time the solvents evaporate and you get left with a very thin layer. But the majority of it happens in the first few weeks, so you wait those first few weeks before you buff it or do the wet sanding to make sure you don't have any problems with either soft lacquer or shrinkage. So it's been 3 weeks now and we're going to go on with the wet sanding. So like I said, it's not too much to go on this because it's fairly good finish already. There's a little bit of texture in it, but nothing too bad. So we're going to start off with 1000 grit and then using a hard block, and then we'll also use a random orbital sander too. A lot of people get worried about using a sander on their finish, but if you use a very fine paper, we're going to use 1000 Ibanez. You should be fine, and as long as you've got enough clear coat on there as well. So I've now hit this with 1000 on the sander and block as well, and you can see the nice shine we had is gone and it's gone all dull. That's supposed to happen because now we've got to bring that gloss back. So the process I normally use is I start off with the block back to 1000 and just to get it 100% true, make sure there's no big little dips in it or anything like that. And I'll use this little block, this is a rubber razor, I use this on the sides, back to a sandpaper obviously. And then after I've got everything true with the block, I'll hit it with the sander with this Ibanez which I mentioned before, 1000. This is like a mesh and it doesn't clog hardly at all, and it does a really good job of removing scratches, so you get a nice uniform scratch pattern out of it. I'm going to do a full video on wet sanding on a different guitar in the next couple of weeks, so you'll have to stay tuned for that one, but this just gives a rough idea of what I've been doing on this one. So I'm going to work through the rest of the grades now, go up to about 2000, and then I'm going to hit it with the buffer. So here we are after the buffing. This has had a quite heavy cut first of buffing, then I've followed up with a finer one, and we're good to go on that. So it's got a nice gloss to it and no swirls or scratches or anything like that. So we're ready to start assembling it now. So here's the neck. This has got a satin finish on the fretboard, so I haven't had to do any wet sanding between frets or anything like that. And then moving up to headstock, we've got a gloss on here. So this has already been wet sanded and buffed, and I've got the logo back in place under there, under the lacquer. And I've also done the fretwork too, because once you sprayed everything, you get lacquer all over the frets, so that needs cleaning off, and then at the same time you can level the frets, then crown and polish them. And on the back we've got a satin finish, just to make it a bit less sticky and grippy like a gloss can be. So this is not a full-on matte, but like a dull sheen to it. So that makes it nice and smooth. So next up I'm going to make a nut foot, and then we can start thinking about putting it together. So got most of the parts on now, and it's just really the wiring and the setup to go. And you can see I've already got this pre-wired. I did this a few weeks back just to make sure everything was ready. There's a CTS parts, switchcraft jack, and obviously an orange drop capacitor. And I'm going to use the original shielding which came in the base. So you can see it's got this copper plate down here, I think it's actually brass. And then I've got a piece of copper foil linking this up, which will link this to this plate. And then on the back of each one of these pickups is also another original brass plate, which is where what these wires come from here. So it should all be all nice and shielded, while still keeping the originality of the shielding plate. And here's the final result. So it's got all the parts on now, and I've given it a setup. And so now I'm just going to give it a play and see what it sounds like. Now with the tone up. And here's just a neck pickup. Now just the bridge. That's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe to see more content like this and keep up to date with what I've been working on in the workshop. Thanks again for watching. See you soon.